Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Your support means everything to us. We'd love to know, which geographical location are you joining from today? At home? On the go? Share with us below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Architect's Mask. Conrad Whitlock tucked away his cell phone after confirming the final details of what would become the largest acquisition in his firm's history. A $50 million deal that would transform 3 struggling tech startups into a unified powerhouse under his silent guidance. None of his neighbors in the modest suburban community of Lakeside Heights would ever suspect that the quiet man who drove a 10-year-old sedan was the mastermind behind Phantom Investments, a private equity firm that operated with surgical precision and absolute discretion. As he pulled into his driveway, Conrad mentally shifted back into the role he'd been playing for years, the struggling financial advisor barely keeping his family afloat. He loosened his tie, deliberately mussed his hair, and added a slight slouch to his shoulders before entering his home. "You're late again," Stella Whitlock called from the kitchen, not bothering to look up from her wine glass. "Dinner's cold. Had to finish up some paperwork," Conrad replied, his voice deliberately weary. "Any chance for a microwave revival?" Stella scoffed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her glass. "Do I look like a waitress? There's a plate in the fridge." Your son locked himself in his room after another disastrous day at school. Conrad nodded silently, making his way to their son's bedroom. He knocked gently. "Leo? It's Dad. Can I come in?" After a moment, the door cracked open. Leo Whitlock, 14 and lanky with his father's observant eyes, stepped aside to let him in. The boy's room was a controlled chaos of sketch pads, books on architecture, and half-finished models of buildings. "Mom's on the warpath again," Leo muttered, returning to his desk where he'd been sketching what looked like an elaborate bridge design. Conrad sat on the edge of the bed. "Rough day at school?" "Mr. Patterson handed back our physics tests. I got a C-." Leo shrugged, trying to appear indifferent despite the tension in his shoulders. "Mom found it in my backpack." "A C- isn't the end of the world," Conrad said gently. "Tell that to Mom. She went ballistic, said I'm wasting my potential, just like—" Leo trailed off, unwilling to finish the sentence. "Just like your old man?" Conrad finished with a sad smile. "It's okay, I know what she thinks of me." What Stella didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that Conrad had deliberately cultivated his image as a mediocre provider. The truth was far more complex. 10 years ago, he discovered his extraordinary talent for identifying struggling businesses with untapped potential. Rather than joining a high-profile firm, he'd created Phantom Investments under a labyrinth of shell companies and proxies, allowing him to operate in complete anonymity. Conrad had his reasons for the deception. His father had been a celebrated financial wizard whose success had made him a target. When Conrad was 12, his father was kidnapped and held for ransom by people who'd researched his wealth extensively. Though the police rescued him, the experience had left deep psychological scars in Conrad. He'd promised himself his own family would never face such dangers. But years of playing the underachiever had taken its toll on his marriage. Stella, once genuinely in love with him, had grown resentful of what she perceived as his lack of ambition. She'd married Conrad expecting the brilliant economics graduate to become a financial titan, not the supposed struggling financial advisor whose modest income barely covered their mortgage. "I notice you're working on that bridge design for the city competition," Conrad said, changing the subject. Leo's face brightened slightly. "Yeah, I probably shouldn't waste time on it since I'm already screwing up my real subjects, but—" "Your passion isn't a waste of time," Conrad interrupted firmly. "Never let anyone tell you otherwise." After spending an hour helping Leo refine his bridge design, Conrad headed to the master bedroom. Stella was already asleep, or pretending to be. Their relationship had devolved into a cold war of silence and occasional skirmishes. He quietly gathered his pillow and a blanket, heading for the guest room that had become his de facto bedroom over the past year. As he lay in the dark, Conrad scrolled through encrypted messages about tomorrow's closing procedures for the massive deal. None of his clients had ever met him in person. He conducted all business through secure channels and trusted proxies. Only his attorney, Miranda Powell, knew his true identity, a necessity protected by attorney-client privilege. The irony wasn't lost on Conrad. To the world that mattered in high finance, he was a mysterious legend whose investment touch turned struggling companies into gold. To his wife, he was a disappointment. To his son, he was a well-meaning but ineffectual father. Something would have to change soon. The mask was becoming unbearable. Chapter 2. The Catalyst. The morning unfolded with its usual routine. Conrad prepared breakfast, while Stella readied herself for her job as an event coordinator for Lakeside Heights' wealthiest residents. Her career gave her access to the social circle she craved, but couldn't fully access due to what she perceived as Conrad's failures. "I'll be home late," Stella announced, barely touching her breakfast. "I'm coordinating the Hendersons' anniversary gala. Try not to wait up." Conrad nodded, noticing how she didn't meet his eyes, a tell he'd cataloged years ago that usually indicated she was lying. The Hendersons' anniversary wasn't for another 3 weeks. He knew because his firm had quietly financed Mr. Henderson's luxury watch company expansion. After Stella left, Conrad drove Leo to school before heading to the small office he maintained downtown, a necessary prop in his elaborate charade. His assistant, Naomi, one of the few people aware of his dual identity, greeted him with a knowing smile. "The papers are ready for the Triton merger," she said, handing him a thick folder. "And Miranda called. She says everything's in place for the final transfer." Conrad nodded, feeling a curious mixture of triumph and emptiness. The $50 million deal would solidify his position as one of the most successful private investors in the country, yet he couldn't share this victory with his family. "I think it's time we discussed Phase 2, he said quietly. Naomi's eyebrows rose. "You're sure?" "Once you start." "I'm sure," Conrad interrupted. "Set up a secure meeting with Miranda for tomorrow morning. It's time to make some changes." Throughout the day, Conrad finalized the details of the deal, his mind partly focused on the elaborate plan he'd been constructing for months. He'd originally intended to reveal his success gradually, easing his family into the reality of his actual wealth. But something told him that scenario was no longer viable. When his private phone buzzed with a message from Leo at 3:15 p.m., Conrad felt a jolt of concern. Leo never texted during school hours. "Failed my math test. Mom's gonna freak. Can you come home early?" Conrad immediately cleared his schedule and drove home, arriving just as Leo walked up the driveway, shoulders slumped under the weight of his backpack and impending confrontation. "That bad?" Conrad asked gently. Leo handed him the test paper without a word. The red F at the top was accompanied by a note from the teacher. "Leo seems distracted. Conference needed." "I studied," Leo said defensively. "I just blanked when the test started." "I believe you," Conrad replied, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Everyone has bad days. We'll figure this out." They entered the house to find Stella already home, her expression thunderous. Conrad realized she must have returned early, perhaps hoping to surprise Leo after school. "Show me," she demanded, holding out her hand. Leo reluctantly handed over the test. Stella's face flushed with anger as she scanned the paper. "An F? After all the tutors and study sessions?" Her voice rose with each word. "This is completely unacceptable, Leo. What were you thinking?" "I tried," Leo began. "Clearly not hard enough." Stella interrupted. "This is what happens when you waste all your time on those ridiculous building designs, instead of focusing on what actually matters." Conrad stepped forward. "Stella, let's discuss this calmly. One test doesn't." "Oh, don't start with your mediocre expectations," Stella snapped, turning her fury toward Conrad. "This is partly your fault. He's learning to settle for failure by watching you." Conrad felt the familiar sting of her words, but maintained his composure. "That's enough, Stella. Leo needs support, not." "Support? Where's your support been for this family? You're a walking example of wasted potential." Stella's voice echoed through the house. "Leo, do you want to end up like your father? A man who can barely keep the lights on?" A man whose colleagues from college are now running investment firms while he struggles with basic financial planning for retirees. "Mom, stop it," Leo pleaded, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "No, you need to hear this," Stella continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "Your father had every opportunity to be successful, and he threw it all away with his pathetic risk aversion and lack of ambition. And now you're following right in his footsteps. You're becoming useless, just like your father." The word hung in the air between them. Useless. Conrad stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. In that moment, something crystallized within him, a decision that had been years in the making. The knowledge that he'd just closed a $50 million deal that morning sat heavy in his mind, a stark contrast to Stella's assessment of him. "Leo, go to your room," Conrad said quietly. "Your mother and I need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," Stella said dismissively. "I have to get ready. I'm meeting clients for dinner." She turned and headed upstairs, leaving Conrad and Leo standing in uncomfortable silence. "She didn't mean it, Dad," Leo said awkwardly. Conrad looked at his son, seeing the mixture of embarrassment and pity in the boy's eyes. That pity was the final straw. "Yes, she did," Conrad replied calmly. "But she's wrong about both of us. Remember that, Leo." Later that evening, after Leo had retreated to his room and Stella had left for her client dinner, Conrad made a series of phone calls from his home office. First to Miranda, then to Naomi, and finally to his private banker. Each call was brief, precise, and set irrevocable events in motion. As he ended the final call, Conrad felt a strange sense of peace. The mask he'd worn for so long was about to come off, and the consequences would be seismic. Chapter 3: The Revelation. Conrad waited until midnight before driving to the upscale restaurant on the other side of town, the one Stella had mentioned in passing to her friend on the phone, not knowing Conrad had overheard. He parked across the street, his expensive binoculars, a tool from his due diligence investigations of potential investments, trained on the restaurant patio. Through the lenses, he watched as Stella laughed intimately with Bradford Dixon, the flashy owner of several local car dealerships. Conrad recognized him immediately. Dixon had approached Conrad's firm for financing 6 months ago, unaware that he was actually meeting with one of Conrad's proxies. Conrad had declined the investment opportunity after his background check revealed Dixon's history of questionable business practices. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Conrad. While Stella believed she was having an affair with a successful businessman, Conrad knew that Dixon's dealerships were barely staying afloat, propped up by creative accounting and mounting debt. As he watched Dixon reach across the table to stroke Stella's hand, Conrad felt no jealousy, only a profound sense of clarity. Their marriage had been dead for years. He had simply been going through the motions for Leo's sake. Conrad returned home and spent the rest of the night putting his plan into motion. He accessed his secure server and transferred documents to Miranda, authorized specific banking transactions, and drafted several letters. By dawn, he had completed preparations for what would be the most decisive day of his life. After catching a few hours of sleep, Conrad drove Leo to school, as usual. "Dad," Leo said hesitantly as they approached the school. "About what Mom said yesterday." "Don't worry about it," Conrad replied. "Sometimes people say things they don't mean when they're angry. But she said stuff like that before," Leo persisted. "And I've seen how you just take it." Conrad turned to face his son, choosing his words carefully. "Leo, there's something important I want you to understand. Sometimes people aren't what they appear to be. Sometimes we keep parts of ourselves hidden for various reasons." "Like what?" Leo asked, his curiosity piqued. "Let's just say things are going to change soon," Conrad answered. "And I want you to remember that whatever happens between your mother and me, you're the most important person in my life." Leo studied his father's face, sensing something significant in his words. "Okay, Dad. One more thing," Conrad added as Leo opened the car door. "Pack a bag when you get home today. Essentials for a couple of weeks. Clothes, your medication, and maybe your sketchbook. Tell your mother you're staying at Damien's house for a school project." "Are we going somewhere?" Leo asked, confused. "Trust me," Conrad said simply. "It's time for a change." After dropping off Leo, Conrad drove to Miranda's office. The elegant attorney greeted him with a knowing smile. "Everything's prepared as you requested," she said, gesturing to the stack of documents on her desk. "Though I must say, Conrad, the timing seems rather sudden." "It's been a decade in the making," Conrad replied, signing where indicated. "I just needed the right catalyst, and Mrs. Whitlock provided that yesterday, I presume?" Miranda asked, her tone professional but her eyes sympathetic. Conrad nodded. "She called me useless, said I could barely keep the lights on." Miranda's eyebrow arched as she glanced at the banking statement showing Conrad's personal net worth, just over $340 million. "Well," she said dryly, "perception and reality rarely align perfectly." By noon, Conrad had executed every element of his plan's first phase. The house mortgage had been paid in full, with ownership transferred solely to his name. 2 new vehicles, a Tesla Model S Plaid for himself and a Land Rover Defender for Leo, had been purchased with cash and would be delivered that afternoon. First-class tickets for a world tour had been booked for him and Leo, with their first destination being Tokyo. Most significantly, Conrad had confirmed with his banker that $5 million had been transferred to a new trust fund in Leo's name, structured to provide for his education and future while protecting him from financial manipulation. Before heading home, Conrad made one final stop at a high-end electronics store, purchasing 2 new smartphones with international capabilities. Everything about their old life would be left behind, including their digital footprints. When Conrad arrived home, he found the house empty as expected. Stella had texted that she'd be working late again. Conrad methodically packed his essential belongings, emptied his home safe of important documents, and transferred his collection of rare coins, a private passion he'd never shared with Stella, to a secure case. As he worked, Conrad reflected on how thoroughly he'd compartmentalized his life. The facade of struggling financial advisor Conrad Whitlock had been maintained so completely that not even his wife had suspected the truth. His real work, the intricate deals and strategic investments that had built his fortune, had been conducted through his network of proxies and secure communications. When Leo returned from school, Conrad helped him pack, explaining only that they would be taking a trip together. To his credit, Leo asked few questions, seeming to understand instinctively that something momentous was occurring. "Dad, is this about what Mom said?" Leo finally asked as they loaded their bags into Conrad's old sedan. "Partly," Conrad admitted, "but it's more about what happens next." With their belongings secured, Conrad took a final walk through the house. In the kitchen, he placed an envelope on the counter, positioned where Stella would immediately see it. Inside was a copy of the paid mortgage statement, the deed transfer, and a brief note in Conrad's precise handwriting. "Stella, I paid off the house. It's now solely in my name, though you may continue to live here if you wish. You'll find 2 new cars in the garage. Consider them my parting gifts, though only one is for you. Leo and I will be traveling for a while. Don't bother trying to reach us on our old numbers. By the way, the lights are still on. I guess I'm not as useless as you thought. Guess who's useless now? Conrad." As a final touch, Conrad left his wedding ring on top of the note. Father and son drove away just as the afternoon sun began its descent, leaving behind a life built on carefully constructed illusions. In the passenger seat, Leo seemed both anxious and exhilarated, occasionally glancing at his father with new eyes. "Where are we really going, Dad?" he finally asked as they headed toward the interstate. Conrad smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in years. "To see the world, Leo, and to start telling the truth." Chapter 4: Shattered Glass. Stella Whitlock arrived home at 11:30 p.m., slightly tipsy from expensive wine and the intoxicating attention Bradford Dixon had lavished on her throughout the evening. She called out for Leo as she entered, then remembered he was supposedly staying at a friend's house for a school project. The house felt unusually quiet, lacking even the subtle sounds of Conrad working in his home office. She kicked off her heels in the foyer and padded into the kitchen for a glass of water. That's when she saw the envelope, her name written in Conrad's neat handwriting, his wedding ring gleaming coldly on top. Something inside her knew, even before opening it, that everything was about to change. Her hands trembled slightly as she read Conrad's note, confusion giving way to disbelief and then to searing anger. She rushed to the garage to confirm his claim and found a new Tesla and Land Rover where Conrad's sedan and her Audi should have been. The vehicle sparkled under the garage lights, price tags still visible on their windshields. Stella stormed back into the house, grabbing her phone to call Conrad, only to hear his message. The number you have reached is no longer in service. She tried Leo's phone next with the same result. What the hell is happening? She shouted into the empty house, her voice echoing off the walls that, according to the documents in her hand, now belonged solely to her supposedly useless husband. Rushing to their bedroom, she flung open Conrad's closet door to find it half empty, his favorite suits and casual clothes missing. His dresser drawers were similarly depleted. In the bathroom, his toiletries were gone. It was as if he'd systematically removed himself from their life. Stella sank onto the bed, her mind racing to make sense of the situation. Conrad had paid off their mortgage, a financial impossibility for the man she thought she knew. He'd purchased 2 luxury vehicles with cash. None of it aligned with the struggling financial advisor who'd been cutting coupons and driving a car with 150,000 miles on it. She called Bradford, who answered groggily. "What's wrong, babe?" "Conrad's gone," Stella said, her voice tight with confusion. "He took Leo and left." "Good riddance," Bradford mumbled. "Now we don't have to sneak around anymore." "You don't understand," Stella snapped. "He paid off the house. He bought 2 cars worth over $200,000. With cash." There was a long silence before Bradford spoke again, his voice now fully alert. "That's impossible. Conrad's broke. Everyone knows that." "Apparently everyone was wrong," Stella replied bitterly. After hanging up, Stella began searching the house for clues. Conrad's home office revealed little. He'd taken his laptop and cleared out his filing cabinet. The safe behind the abstract painting was open and empty. By morning, Stella's confusion had hardened into fury. She began calling everyone they knew, demanding information about Conrad's whereabouts. No one had answers. His office downtown reported that he hadn't come in and wasn't answering calls. In Tokyo, Conrad and Leo checked into the presidential suite of the Park Hyatt. Leo stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing in awe at the sprawling cityscape below. "Dad, how can we afford this?" he asked, gesturing around the luxurious suite. Conrad took a deep breath. "That's something we need to discuss. Sit down, Leo." For the next hour, Conrad explained the truth about his career and finances. He showed Leo secure photos of the companies he controlled, the investments he'd made, and finally, his personal banking statements. Leo stared at the screen, his eyes widening at the 9 figure sum displayed. $340 million, he whispered. "All this time you let Mom think." "I created a fiction," Conrad admitted. "Initially for security reasons, but eventually it became easier to maintain the lie than to explain why I'd hidden the truth for so long." "Does this have something to do with what happened to Grandpa?" Leo asked perceptively. Conrad nodded, impressed by his son's intuition. "Partly. When I was about your age, my father was kidnapped by people who targeted him for his wealth. After that, I became paranoid about displaying success. But why didn't you at least tell Mom and me?" "Your mother." Conrad paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your mother and I married young. I already had some success, but was still maintaining a low profile. As time went on, she became increasingly resentful of what she perceived as my lack of ambition. By the time my wealth had grown significantly, our relationship had deteriorated to the point where I didn't trust her with the truth. And now? Why tell me now?" Conrad's expression softened. "Because you deserve to know who your father really is. Not the failure your mother described, but not exactly a hero either. Just a man who made complicated choices." Leo was silent for a long moment, processing everything. "So what happens next?" "We travel. We learn about each other without the lies between us. And when we return, everything will be different." Conrad reached into his pocket and pulled out a new smartphone. "This is yours now. New number, secure communications. I've already loaded it with the contact information for Naomi and Miranda, my assistant and attorney. They can reach us anytime. What about Mom? Conrad's expression hardened slightly. Your mother made her choices long before yesterday. The words she said to us, were merely the final straw. As Leo explored their suite, Conrad checked his secure email. Naomi had confirmed that Stella had been calling the office repeatedly, growing increasingly agitated with each call. Miranda reported that Bradford Dixon had attempted to access information about Conrad's finances through a private investigator, an expected move that would lead nowhere. Conrad smiled grimly. Phase 1 was complete. Stella's world was already beginning to crack. Phase 2 would shatter it entirely. Back in Lakeside Heights, Stella's day had gone from bad to catastrophic. She'd driven to Conrad's office, demanding answers from his receptionist, only to be told that Conrad had taken an indefinite leave of absence. When she'd threatened to call the police to report Leo missing, the receptionist had calmly produced a notarized letter from Conrad, granting him sole temporary custody during their trip, signed by Stella herself. "I never signed this," Stella had shouted, staring at what appeared to be her perfect signature. The receptionist, Naomi, Conrad had called her, had simply smiled. "We have video of you signing it last month, Mrs. Whitlock. Perhaps you forgot." Stella knew she was being lied to, but the signature was unervingly perfect. She'd fled the office, her thoughts in chaos. By evening, Stella had called Conrad's number 50 times, each attempt met with the same disconnection message. She'd sent 30 text messages, ranging from furious demands to tearful pleas. "Where the hell are you? Bring Leo home now. You can't just take our son and disappear. Whatever game you're playing, it's over. Come home. Conrad, please. Let's talk about this. I'm sorry about what I said. I was upset. At least tell me Leo is safe." No responses came. When Bradford arrived that night, his reaction to the news about Conrad's apparent wealth had shifted from disbelief to calculating interest. "There has to be an explanation," he said, pacing the living room. "Maybe he embezzled the money. Maybe he's running a Ponzi scheme." "Conrad's too cautious for that," Stella replied, her voice hollow. "Too risk-averse. Everyone has secrets," Bradford insisted. "We just need to find out what is ours." As Bradford began making calls to his contacts in local finance, Stella wandered into Leo's room. The space felt different, emptier in subtle ways. His favorite books were gone, as was the architectural model he'd been working on for months. On his desk, she found a single sketch, a detailed drawing of the Tokyo skyline with a note at the bottom that read, "First stop." The realization that Conrad had been planning this, that Leo had known they were leaving, sent a wave of betrayal through her. Her son had chosen his father over her. In that moment, Stella's phone chimed with an incoming email. The subject line read simply, "Conrad Whitlock closes $50 million tech merger." The email was a business newsletter she'd subscribed to years ago and usually ignored. With trembling fingers, she opened it to find a feature article about a mysterious investment strategist named Conrad Whitlock, who had orchestrated one of the year's most significant private equity deals, the merger of 3 tech startups into a new entity called Tricor Solutions. The article mentioned that Whitlock was known for his reclusiveness and brilliance, operating primarily through proxies and never appearing in public. The final paragraph noted that this latest success added to Whitlock's estimated net worth of well over $300 million. Stella stared at her phone in disbelief, the pieces finally clicking into place. The husband she'd belittled for years, the man she'd called useless to his face and derided behind his back, was actually one of the most successful private investors in the country. And now he was gone, taking their son and leaving her with nothing but a paid-off house, a luxury car, and the dawning realization that she'd monumentally misjudged the man she'd married. Her phone chimed again with another email, this one from Miranda Powell, Conrad's attorney. It contained only a link to a cloud storage folder and a password. When Stella entered the password, she found hundreds of photos, surveillance images of her and Bradford together over the past 18 months, date and timestamps included. The final image was from 2 nights ago, Bradford's hand intimately placed on her thigh under the restaurant table. The message was clear. Conrad had known everything. Stella's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor of Leo's room, her son's sketch of Tokyo still clutched in her hand, as the full magnitude of what she'd lost began to sink in. Chapter 5. The Domino Effect. 1 week into their world tour, Conrad and Leo stood atop the Tokyo Skytree, gazing out at the sprawling metropolis below. Leo had been flourishing away from the pressure of his mother's expectations, revealing a natural talent for architecture that Conrad was determined to nurture. "I've been thinking," Conrad said, watching his son sketch the cityscape. "When we get to our next destination, how would you feel about taking some architecture courses?" Leo looked up from his sketch pad. "Like college courses? Why not? Money isn't an issue, and you clearly have both the passion and the aptitude." Leo's expression brightened. "That would be amazing, Dad." He hesitated before adding, "I never told Mom how much I loved architecture because she always said it wasn't a real career like medicine or law." Conrad's jaw tightened briefly. "Your mother and I had different priorities." As they descended in the elevator, Conrad checked his secure phone. There was a message from Naomi with a simple update. Domino 1 has fallen. Conrad allowed himself a small smile. Phase 2 was proceeding exactly as planned. Back in Lakeside Heights, Bradford Dixon stared in disbelief at the foreclosure notice on his desk. His primary bank had called in his loans after an anonymous tip had revealed irregularities in his dealership's financial reporting. The audit that followed had uncovered years of creative accounting and tax discrepancies. "This can't be happening," he muttered, reaching for his phone to call his attorney. Before he could dial, his assistant buzzed through. "Mr. Dixon, there's a Ms. Powell here to see you. She says she represents someone interested in purchasing your dealerships." Bradford straightened his tie, a flicker of hope igniting. "Send her in." Miranda Powell entered with the confident stride of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. Without preamble, she placed a folder on Bradford's desk. "My client is prepared to purchase all 3 of your dealerships at 60% of market value, with the deal closing within 48 hours. This offer expires at noon tomorrow." Bradford scoffed. 60%? That's highway robbery. "Who's your client?" Miranda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Someone who knows exactly how desperate your situation is, Mr. Dixon. Someone who also knows about the $430,000 you embezzled from your previous employer 7 years ago, a detail that hasn't yet reached the auditors, but certainly could." The color drained from Bradford's face. "How could anyone possibly know about that?" "My client is thorough," Miranda replied, standing to leave. "Noon tomorrow, Mr. Dixon. Take the offer or face the consequences." As Miranda left, Bradford immediately called Stella, his voice tight with panic. "Something's happening. I'm being set up." "What are you talking about?" Stella asked, distracted by her own problems. She'd spent the morning being informed by the country club that her membership had been revoked due to ethical concerns, the same country club where she'd been coordinating events for the elite of Lakeside Heights. "My dealerships are being foreclosed on, and now some lawyer shows up offering to buy them for pennies on the dollar." She knew things, Stella. Things nobody could know. Stella felt a chill run through her. What was the lawyer's name? Powell. Miranda Powell. The same attorney who had sent Stella the damning photos of her affair. The same attorney who had produced the forged custody document with Stella's perfect signature. "It's Conrad," Stella said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's behind this." "That's impossible," Bradford scoffed. "Conrad's just a small-time financial planner. He doesn't have this kind of power." "You don't understand," Stella insisted. "Conrad isn't who he thought he was. He's worth hundreds of millions. He's been hiding it all these years." There was a long silence before Bradford spoke again, his voice now calculating. "If that's true, then we need to find a way to use it. If he's been hiding his assets during your marriage, that's fraud. You could be entitled to half." The idea took root in Stella's mind immediately. She'd already consulted a divorce attorney, who had been skeptical of her claims about Conrad's hidden wealth. But if she could prove it, "I need to get into his home office," Stella decided. "There must be something there, some evidence I missed." After hanging up, Stella methodically began searching Conrad's office again. She removed books from shelves, checked behind pictures, and examined the floor for loose boards. Finally, in frustration, she began pounding on the walls, listening for hollow spots. In the corner behind Conrad's desk, One section sounded different. Stella examined it closely and discovered it seemed cleverly disguised by the wallpaper pattern. She pried at it with a letter opener until a small panel popped open, revealing a hidden safe. Her heart racing, Stella tried combinations on the digital keypad. Their anniversary failed, Leo's birthday failed, Conrad's birthday failed. In desperation, she tried her own birthday, and to her surprise, the safe clicked open. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. For Stella, when you inevitably find this. With trembling hands, she took the drive to Conrad's computer and plugged it in. The drive contained a single video file labeled Watch Me. The video began playing automatically. Conrad appeared on screen, seated in his office. Not their home office, but an elegant space she'd never seen before. "Hello, Stella," the recorded Conrad said calmly. "If you're watching this, it means you've found my emergency safe after I've initiated Contingency Plan Alpha. Congratulations on your persistence, though I must admit I made this fairly easy to find." Conrad's image leaned forward slightly. "You're undoubtedly confused about recent events, so allow me to clarify some things. Yes, I am wealthy, significantly so. I've spent our entire marriage hiding this fact from you for reasons that once seemed important, but have become increasingly irrelevant as your contempt for me grew." He smiled thinly. "You're probably thinking about divorce now, calculating your share of my fortune. Let me save you the trouble. Every dollar I've earned has been meticulously documented and legally structured to remain my separate property under the laws of our state. The prenuptial agreement you signed, which explicitly covered undisclosed assets acquired during marriage, has been reinforced by annual legal reviews you unwittingly signed during our tax preparations." Stella remembered those documents, pages of legalese she'd signed without reading while Conrad prepared their seemingly modest tax returns. "Furthermore," Conrad continued, "I've been documenting your affair with Bradford Dixon for the past 18 months, which constitutes marital misconduct under our state's laws. This would significantly reduce any claim you might make, even if my assets were marital property, which they are not." The Conrad in the video paused, his expression hardening. "I could have revealed my success years ago, Stella. I chose not to because I wanted to be loved for myself, not my money. What I discovered instead was that you didn't love me at all. The contempt you showed, the disdain you expressed, those revealed your true character. As for what happens next," he continued, "that depends partly on you. If you choose to pursue legal action, you'll find yourself facing a team of attorneys who have been preparing for this eventuality for years. If you choose to accept the situation gracefully, you'll find that the house and car I've left you will provide a comfortable life, though perhaps not the one you envisioned when you began sleeping with a man whose dealerships are now being foreclosed upon." The video ended with Conrad looking directly into the camera. "One final note, Stella. Leo knows everything now. All the times you belittled me in front of him, all the pressure you put on him to succeed where you thought I had failed. He now understands the full context of those moments. I'll leave you to imagine how that revelation has affected his view of you." The screen went black, leaving Stella staring at her own reflection in the monitor, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face. In Switzerland, Conrad and Leo enjoyed a leisurely breakfast at their hotel in Zurich. Leo had just completed his first week of specialized architecture classes at ETH Zurich, where his talent had already drawn attention from the instructors. "Your project impressed Professor Muller," Conrad remarked, scrolling through an email on his phone. "He's asking if you'd consider joining their summer program for gifted students." Leo looked up from his sketchbook, his eyes bright with excitement. "Really? That would be amazing." Conrad smiled, enjoying his son's newfound confidence. The past few weeks had transformed Leo from an insecure, anxious teenager into a young man beginning to recognize his own potential. His secure phone buzzed with a message from Miranda. Dixon signed the papers. "All 3 dealerships now under our control. Domino 2 down." Conrad's smile took on a harder edge. He thought of Stella, alone in the house they had shared, surrounded by evidence of his success and her misjudgment. He thought of Bradford, signing away his business empire for a fraction of its value to avoid criminal charges. "Everything okay, Dad?" Leo asked, noticing the shift in Conrad's expression. Conrad softened his features. "Everything's exactly as it should be, Leo. Exactly as it should be." Chapter 6: Collateral Damage. By the third month of their world tour, Conrad and Leo had settled into a comfortable routine. They would spend a few weeks in each location, with Leo attending specialized architecture workshops, while Conrad managed his business empire remotely. Currently in Barcelona, they had taken an apartment with a stunning view of Gaudi's unfinished masterpiece, La Sagrada Familia. Leo had flourished during their travels, his natural talent for architectural design nurtured by exposure to the world's greatest structures and mentorship from renowned architects Conrad had connected him with. More importantly, the pressure and anxiety that had plagued him in Lakeside Heights had dissipated, replaced by genuine confidence and curiosity. "Dad, Professor Garcia invited me to join his studio session tomorrow," Leo announced as they shared dinner on their terrace. "They're discussing innovative approaches to sustainable urban development." Conrad nodded approvingly. "Sounds perfect for you. Your bridge design incorporated several sustainable elements." "That reminds me," Leo said hesitantly. "I got an email from Mom yesterday." Conrad's expression remained neutral, though his hand tightened imperceptibly around his wine glass. "What did she say?" "She wants me to come home. Says she misses me and that you're—" Leo trailed off uncomfortably. "I'm what?" Conrad prompted. "Manipulating me. Turning me against her." Leo met his father's gaze directly. "She says you're using your money to buy my affection." Conrad considered his response carefully. "And what do you think, Leo?" "I think she never bothered to see who I really was until I was gone," Leo answered, surprising Conrad with his insight. "She never encouraged my interest in architecture or supported my creative projects. She just wanted me to get perfect grades and follow the path she thought was best." "People are complex," Conrad offered. "Your mother isn't entirely wrong to want academic success for you." "It wasn't about me, though, was it?" Leo asked perceptively. "It was about how my success or failure reflected on her." Conrad nodded slowly. "That's very insightful. Are you still going to divorce her?" Leo asked, the question hanging heavily between them. "The paperwork has already been filed," Conrad confirmed. "Miranda has been instructed to proceed regardless of your mother's response." Leo was quiet for a moment. "I feel bad for her sometimes. I'm not sure she understands what she's lost." "That's the difference between consequences and punishment, Leo," Conrad explained. "I'm not punishing your mother. I'm simply allowing her to experience the natural consequences of her choices." Later that evening, after Leo had retired to his room, Conrad checked his secure messages. There was an update from Naomi that made him smile grimly. In Lakeside Heights, Stella Whitlock's world continued to crumble methodically, precisely as Conrad had planned. The country club had permanently revoked her membership after anonymous evidence surfaced of her berating the staff and making racist comments about guests. Carefully edited recordings from Conrad's surveillance that presented her worst moments without context. Her event planning business had collapsed after her most prestigious clients received anonymous portfolios detailing her affair with Bradford Dixon, complete with timestamps showing she had been with him during events she claimed to be managing. Most devastatingly, her parents, with whom she'd always had a strained relationship, had received a package containing video of Stella mocking them to Bradford, calling them small-town nobodies, and expressing relief that Conrad's modest income had given her an excuse to avoid spending holidays with them. The isolation Conrad had engineered was complete. Stella's friends had abandoned her once her social standing collapsed. Her lover was now bankrupted, his dealerships sold to a holding company Conrad secretly controlled. Her son was traveling the world with the husband she'd belittled for years, experiencing educational and cultural opportunities beyond anything she could have provided. Conrad picked up his phone and checked Stella's latest messages. She had sent 347 texts over the past 3 months, their tone evolving from rage to disbelief to desperate pleading. The most recent read, "Conrad, please. I'm begging you. Let me speak to Leo. Let me explain. I've lost everything. Please don't take my son, too." Conrad left it unanswered, as he had all the others. He opened his laptop and navigated to a secure website where he could view the surveillance feeds from their house in Lakeside Heights. Stella was sitting in the kitchen, surrounded by empty wine bottles, staring vacantly at her phone, waiting for a response that would never come. Conrad felt no pleasure in her suffering, but neither did he feel remorse. He had simply constructed the perfect consequence for years of contempt, allowing Stella to experience the same isolation and dismissal she had inflicted on him and Leo. His phone chimed with a message from Miranda. Final phase ready to implement upon your approval. Conrad typed a simple response. Proceed. The next morning in Lakeside Heights, Stella was awakened by the doorbell. She staggered to the door, disheveled from another night of fitful sleep and too much wine, to find Miranda Powell standing on her doorstep, elegant as always in a tailored suit. Mrs. Whitlock, Miranda said coolly, I have some documents that require your attention. Stella stepped aside, wordlessly, to let her in. Over the past months, she had learned that fighting against Conrad's attorney was futile. Miranda Powell represented a system of power and privilege that Stella had once believed herself part of, but now recognized had always been beyond her reach. Miranda placed a thick envelope on the kitchen counter. These are the final divorce papers. My client has been quite generous, all things considered. You may keep the house and car, and he has established a modest trust that will provide you with $5,000 monthly for the next 10 years. Stella laughed bitterly. Generous? He's worth hundreds of millions. And as I've explained repeatedly, those assets are legally separate from marital property, Miranda replied evenly. Furthermore, your documented marital misconduct substantially weakens any claim you might make. The offer on the table is significantly more than you would receive if we litigated this matter. Stella's shoulders slumped in defeat. And Leo? Mr. Whitlock has been granted primary physical custody, with visitation rights for you to be determined based on Leo's preferences once he turns 16 next month. Miranda's tone softened slightly. For what it's worth, Mrs. Whitlock, Leo is thriving. His architectural talents are being nurtured by some of the field's greatest minds, and he's been accepted to a special program at the Architectural Association in London this fall. Tears welled in Stella's eyes. He always loved designing buildings. I thought it was just a hobby. Perhaps if you had taken more interest in his passion rather than focusing solely on his academic performance, you might have recognized his gifts sooner, Miranda observed, her tone clinically detached rather than accusatory. After Miranda left, Stella sat at the kitchen table with the divorce papers, her life reduced to legal language and financial settlements that felt like pittance compared to what she had lost. Her phone chimed with a text from Bradford, his first in weeks. It's over, Stella. I'm moving to Arizona to stay with my brother. Conrad won. He destroyed everything I built. Stella stared at the message, a hollow laugh escaping her lips. Conrad had indeed won, and so completely that neither she nor Bradford had even seen the true scope of his strategy until it was too late. She picked up her phone and typed one more message to Conrad. I understand now. You were never useless. I was just blind. I'm sorry. For the first time in 3 months, she received a response. Apology noted. Goodbye, Stella. In Barcelona, Conrad closed his phone and turned his attention back to Leo, who was eagerly showing him the sustainable urban development concept he'd created during Professor Garcia's workshop. This is really impressive, Leo, Conrad said sincerely, studying the intricate design. You have a remarkable talent. Leo beamed at the praise. Do you think we could visit London next? There's an exhibition at the Royal Institute of British Architects I'd love to see. London it is, Conrad agreed, putting his arm around his son's shoulders. The world is yours to explore, Leo. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. As they discussed their plans for London, Conrad felt a sense of completion. Phase 3 of his plan was now in motion, bringing his strategy full circle. Stella was isolated and humbled. Bradford was financially ruined. And most importantly, Leo was flourishing away from the toxic environment they had created. The mask Conrad had worn for so long was permanently discarded, allowing both him and Leo to finally live authentically. Whatever guilt he might have felt about the calculated destruction of Stella's life was outweighed by the knowledge that Leo would never again be made to feel inadequate by someone who should have nurtured his gifts. The strategist had played the long game and won decisively, as he always did. Chapter 7. New Foundations. 1 year had passed since Conrad and Leo had left Lakeside Heights. After completing their world tour, they had settled in London, where Leo had been thriving at the prestigious Architectural Association. Conrad had purchased a historic townhouse in Kensington and established a new headquarters for Phantom Investments nearby, finally stepping out of the shadows to take public credit for his financial achievements. On a crisp autumn morning, Conrad sat in his home office reviewing quarterly reports when his secure phone rang. The caller ID showed Miranda Powell. "Miranda, good morning," Conrad answered. "I trust everything is proceeding as planned." "Better than planned," Miranda replied. "The Bradford-Dixon situation has been fully resolved. After the bankruptcy proceedings, we were able to acquire his remaining assets through our shell company for pennies on the dollar. His attempt to file a lawsuit claiming you orchestrated his downfall was dismissed for lack of evidence yesterday." "Excellent," Conrad said, making a note in his calendar. "And Stella?" "She's accepted the revised settlement terms," Miranda confirmed. "In exchange for the additional monthly stipend, she's agreed to waive all future claims and maintain confidentiality about your financial history. She's also agreed not to contact Leo unless he initiates communication." Conrad felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The final pieces of his strategic extraction from his former life were falling into place with the precision he'd envisioned. "Thank you, Miranda. Your work on this has been invaluable." After ending the call, Conrad found Leo in the townhouse's sunroom, working on an architectural model for his latest school project. "That looks impressive," Conrad observed, studying the intricate design. "Is this for Professor Harrington's sustainability challenge?" Leo nodded, carefully adjusting a miniature solar panel array on the model's roof. "It's a community center that generates more energy than it uses. I'm incorporating water reclamation systems and vertical gardens." Conrad smiled with genuine pride. In the years since they'd left Lakeside Heights, Leo had transformed from an anxious, underperforming student into a confident young architect in training whose designs had already won 2 student competitions. "I heard from Miranda this morning," Conrad said, taking a seat across from Leo. "The divorce is finally settled." Leo's hands stilled on his model. "How's Mom?" "Accepting the situation," Conrad replied carefully. "The agreement includes a provision that she won't contact you directly. Any communication would need to be initiated by you." Leo was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I'm not ready to talk to her yet. Maybe someday, but not now." "That's entirely your decision," Conrad assured him. "There's no rush." "Has she tried to contact you again?" Conrad hesitated before answering truthfully. "Yes. She sends messages occasionally, primarily about financial matters, but sometimes asking about you." What Conrad didn't share was the nature of Stella's most recent message, sent late at night with the desperation of someone who had lost everything. "I know what you did, Conrad. Not just to me, but to Bradford. You systematically destroyed both of us. Was it worth it? Did ruining our lives make you feel powerful?" He had left it unanswered, as he did most of her messages now. "I have some news of my own," Conrad said, changing the subject. "I've been invited to deliver a keynote address at next month's Global Investment Summit. I've decided to accept." Leo looked up in surprise. "Really? You're going public with everything?" "Not everything," Conrad clarified, "but I'm tired of operating exclusively from the shadows. It's time for Conrad Whitlock to take credit for his achievements." Later that afternoon, Conrad met with Naomi, who had relocated to London to continue as his chief of staff. They sat in his private study, reviewing the final reports on what Conrad still referred to as the Lakeside situation. "Bradford-Dixon has moved to Phoenix," Naomi reported, consulting her tablet. "He's working as a sales manager at his brother's plumbing supply company. His attempt to rebuild in the automotive industry failed when our contacts made sure his loan applications were rejected." Conrad nodded, satisfied. "And the property?" "The former Dixon automotive locations have been successfully converted. Two are now Tesla dealerships, and the third is being developed as a technical training center for disadvantaged youth. Conrad allowed himself a small smile at the irony. Dixon's former flagship dealership, from which he had orchestrated both financial fraud and his affair with Stella, was now providing opportunities for young people to build legitimate careers. And Stella's former clients? All successfully transferred to our preferred vendors, Naomi confirmed. Her attempts to rebuild her event planning business in Lakeside Heights have been consistently thwarted. As you predicted, the social isolation has been her most difficult adjustment. Conrad nodded, feeling no pleasure in this confirmation, but acknowledging the strategic success. And Leo's school records? All transferred and updated. His current transcript shows remarkable improvement, and Professor Harrington specifically mentioned his potential for a scholarship to the architectural graduate program at Cambridge. Pride swelled in Conrad's chest. He's extraordinary. All he needed was the right environment to flourish. As Naomi departed, Conrad poured himself a rare glass of scotch and stood by the window overlooking the garden where Leo was now sketching a section of the ornate Victorian greenhouse. The past year had unfolded almost exactly as Conrad had planned, a strategic dismantling of his false life and reconstruction of an authentic one. The revenge he had taken against Stella and Bradford had been meticulous and absolute, designed not merely to punish, but to systematically deconstruct the foundations of their existence, just as they had attempted to do to him and Leo with their emotional abuse and betrayal. Conrad's phone chimed with a message from a number he didn't recognize. The text was brief, but sent a chill through him. Revenge has a cost, Conrad, and bills always come due. B. For the first time since leaving Lakeside Heights, Conrad felt a flicker of unease. Bradford Dixon had been thoroughly defeated, financially ruined, socially disgraced, and legally compromised. He should have no resources left for threats. Conrad forwarded the message to his security team with instructions to trace its origin and increase surveillance on both Bradford and Stella. The strategist in him recognized that even the most brilliant plans could have unforeseen variables. As evening fell over London, Conrad joined Leo for dinner in their formal dining room, pushing the concerning message from his mind to focus on his son's animated description of his latest architectural inspiration. "I've been thinking about what you said about giving back," Leo said as they finished their meal. "About using privilege to create opportunity for others." "Oh," Conrad prompted, intrigued. "I'd like to establish a scholarship," Leo continued, "for students interested in sustainable architecture who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. We could fund it through the foundation you mentioned starting." Conrad felt a surge of pride, so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. The son he had rescued from a toxic environment had not only flourished himself, but was already thinking about extending that opportunity to others. "That's a wonderful idea, Leo. We'll set it up first thing tomorrow." Later that night, after Leo had retired to his room, Conrad received a call from his security chief. "Sir, we've traced the message. It didn't come from Bradford Dixon. It came from a burner phone purchased in London 3 days ago." Conrad's blood ran cold. "London? Are you certain?" "Positive, sir. The phone was used within 2 miles of your residence." Conrad immediately checked the security system, confirming that all entrances were secured and the alarm was active. Then he quietly walked to Leo's room, opening the door just enough to confirm his son was sleeping peacefully. Someone from his past had followed them to London. Someone with a grudge and enough resources to track them down despite their careful relocation. Conrad returned to his study and opened his laptop, accessing the secure server where he kept contingency plans for every conceivable threat. He had not built his fortune by being unprepared, and he would not risk Leo's safety by underestimating this new danger. Whoever had sent that message would soon discover that Conrad Whitlock's capacity for strategic ruthlessness had only begun to reveal itself. Chapter 8. Ghost from the Past. The mystery of the threatening text deepened over the following week. Conrad's security team traced the burner phone's movements through central London, but lost the trail when it was apparently discarded near Paddington Station. Enhanced security measures were implemented around both the townhouse and Leo's school, with plainclothes guards maintaining discreet surveillance. Conrad had not shared the threat with Leo, unwilling to disrupt the stability his son had found. Instead, he maintained his regular schedule while quietly activating a network of contacts to investigate who might have followed them from Lakeside Heights. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Conrad was meeting with investors at Phantom's London headquarters when his secure line rang with Naomi's designated code. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said smoothly to the venture capitalists gathered around his conference table. "I need to take this." In his private office, Conrad answered tensely. "What's happened?" "Sir, we've identified a possible security concern," Naomi reported. "A woman matching Stella's description was photographed by our surveillance system near Leo's school yesterday. She didn't approach the building, but she observed it for approximately 20 minutes before departing in a taxi." Conrad's grip tightened on the phone. "Confirm it's her. Then have the security team bring her to the Belgravia safe house. No interaction with Leo, understood?" "Understood, sir." Conrad ended the call, his mind already calculating probabilities and consequences. Stella had never been particularly resourceful or determined. For her to track them to London and conduct surveillance suggested either a dramatic change in character or external assistance. The threatening text message took on new significance in this context. Could Bradford Dixon be coordinating with Stella from Phoenix? The timing seemed more than coincidental. Conrad returned to his meeting, maintaining his composed exterior while his mind worked through contingency scenarios. If Stella had indeed come to London, she had violated the non-contact agreement in their divorce settlement. That gave him legal leverage, but didn't explain how she had found them or what she hoped to accomplish. Later that evening, Conrad received confirmation from his security team. Facial recognition had verified Stella's identity from the surveillance footage. She was staying at a mid-range hotel in Bayswater under her maiden name, Morrison. "Should we proceed with interception, sir?" his security chief asked over the secure line. Conrad considered the options. Confronting Stella directly might provide answers, but could also escalate the situation unpredictably. Maintain surveillance for now, he decided. I want to know who she contacts, where she goes, and especially if she attempts to approach Leo again. After ending the call, Conrad went to check on Leo, finding him engrossed in a complex CAD design in his home workspace. "Working late?" Conrad asked casually. Leo looked up with a tired smile. "Final revisions for the Sustainable Housing Project. Professor Harrington thinks it has potential for the Buckminster Fuller Prize." Conrad's chest swelled with pride, even as his concern for Leo's safety intensified. His son had flourished beyond his expectations, once freed from Stella's constant criticism and pressure to conform to her narrow vision of success. "Don't stay up too late," Conrad advised, resisting the urge to warn Leo about potential danger. "Your presentation is important, but so is rest." The next morning, Conrad was reviewing security footage from overnight monitoring when his phone chimed with another text from the unknown number. "Your son's design project is impressive. The vertical garden integration is particularly innovative. Does he know about his mother yet?" A cold rage settled in Conrad's chest. Not only was the sender aware of Leo's architectural work, but they had specifically referenced Stella's presence in London. This was no longer a vague threat, but a targeted provocation. Conrad immediately called his security chief. "Bring Stella in. Now." Within 2 hours, Conrad stood in the sparsely furnished living room of a nondescript townhouse in Belgravia that served as one of his secure locations. His security team had intercepted Stella leaving her hotel and brought her there without incident. She sat on the sofa, looking both defiant and somehow diminished from the confident, status-obsessed woman he had married. Her designer clothes had been replaced by off-the-rack items, and her once perfect manicure was noticeably absent. "Hello, Stella," Conrad said flatly. "I believe our divorce agreement included a no-contact provision regarding Leo." Stella met his gaze directly. "I haven't contacted him. I just wanted to see him from a distance. To know he's all right." "He's thriving," Conrad replied coldly. "No thanks to your years of undermining his confidence and dismissing his talents." "I made mistakes," Stella admitted. surprising Conrad with her directness. I was wrong about many things, including you. Conrad's expression remained impassive. Your regrets are irrelevant. What concerns me is how you found us and who you're working with. Confusion flickered across Stella's face. Working with? I'm not working with anyone. I hired a private investigator to find you. That's all. And the texts? Conrad pressed. Are you going to deny sending those as well? What texts? Conrad, I don't know what you're talking about. Conrad studied her carefully. Either Stella had become an exceptional actress, or she genuinely didn't know about the threatening messages. Before he could pursue this line of questioning, his phone rang with his security chief's emergency code. Excuse me, he said tersely, stepping into the adjoining room. What is it? Sir, we have a situation at Mr. Leo's school. The security chief reported urgently. A man attempted to approach him as students were changing classes. Our operative intercepted him before contact was made. The man fled, but dropped his phone. It matches the one used to send the texts. Conrad's blood ran cold. Is Leo safe? Yes, sir. Our operative ensured he remained unaware of the incident. The school has been notified of a potential security concern without specifics. I want the surveillance footage immediately and increase Leo's security detail to 3 operatives effective immediately. Conrad ended the call and returned to where Stella waited, his mind racing with possibilities. If she wasn't behind the texts, and Bradford Dixon was supposedly in Phoenix, who did you hire to find us? Conrad demanded. Stella blinked at his sudden intensity. A private investigator recommended by Bradford. His name was Nolan something. He specialized in international cases. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Conrad had been so focused on Stella as the potential threat that he'd overlooked the possibility of a more sophisticated player in the background. When did you last communicate with Bradford? Conrad asked. About 2 months ago, Stella replied. He said he had a lead on where you might have gone after your world tour. That's when he recommended Nolan. Conrad's tactical mind quickly recalculated. Bradford Dixon had more resources than anticipated, possibly through family connections or undiscovered assets. More importantly, he had cunningly used Stella as an unwitting distraction while positioning someone else, presumably this Nolan, to approach Leo directly. Conrad turned to his security chief, who had entered the room. I want everything we have on Bradford Dixon's family connections, particularly any with military or intelligence backgrounds. And I want a full background check on any private investigator named Nolan who specializes in international cases. Turning back to Stella, Conrad made a rapid decision. You're going to remain in our custody until this situation is resolved. Your presence in London has complicated matters significantly. Custody? Stella repeated incredulously. You can't just hold me prisoner, Conrad. I can and I will, Conrad replied without emotion. You violated our agreement by coming here. More importantly, you've inadvertently placed Leo in danger by leading Bradford's operative to him. As Stella processed this accusation, Conrad's phone chimed with another text message. This one made his blood freeze. The game changes now, Conrad. Your protection isn't as thorough as you think. If I can get this close to Leo once, I can do it again. Let's discuss terms. Nolan. Attached was a photo taken that very morning of Leo entering his school, clearly shot from close range without Conrad's security team detecting the photographer. Conrad showed the message to his security chief, whose expression darkened. Sir, this level of surveillance suggests professional training, possibly former intelligence or special forces. Conrad nodded grimly. Find out exactly who we're dealing with, and move Leo to the safe house in Cornwall immediately. Use the school emergency protocol we established. As his team sprang into action, Conrad turned back to Stella, whose face had paled upon seeing the photo of Leo. I didn't know, she whispered. Conrad, you have to believe me. I would never put Leo in danger. Intentionally? Perhaps not, Conrad conceded. But your resentment and Bradford's desire for revenge have created this situation nonetheless. Later that evening, Conrad sat in the secure communications room of his Kensington townhouse, monitoring the transport of Leo to the remote Cornwall property. The extraction had gone smoothly, with Leo told only that a credible security threat required temporary relocation. His security team had compiled preliminary information on Nolan Reese, the operative Bradford had hired. The picture it painted was concerning. Former British intelligence, with specialized training in surveillance and extraction, dishonorably discharged for unauthorized operations, and subsequently working as a high-end private contractor for clients willing to pay for morally ambiguous services. Conrad's phone rang with a call from an unlisted number. He activated the call tracing protocol before answering. "Whitlock," he said tersely. "Impressive security response today," came a smooth, cultured voice. "Your son was relocated within 3 hours of the incident. Professional work." "Nolan Reese," Conrad replied, signaling his team to continue the trace. "Bradford Dixon must be paying you well for this level of operation." Dixon provided the motivation and initial funding. Reese confirmed casually. "But I've developed a personal interest in this case." "You're quite the strategic mind, Conrad. The way you systematically dismantled Dixon and your ex-wife was artistry." "What do you want?" Conrad demanded, keeping Reese talking while the trace continued. "Originally, to help Dixon get evidence of your financial manipulations. Now, I'm more interested in testing my skills against someone of your caliber. It's rare to find a worthy opponent." The casual arrogance in Reese's tone sent a chill through Conrad. This wasn't a simple revenge mission anymore. It had evolved into something potentially more dangerous, a personal challenge from a trained operative who viewed the situation as an intellectual game. "Then you should know you're outmatched," Conrad replied coldly. "I've identified you. I know your background, and my resources far exceed anything Dixon could provide." Reese chuckled. "That's why this is interesting. Here's my proposal. I'll cease all operations targeting your son in exchange for £10 million transferred to an offshore account. Consider it a consulting fee for exposing the weaknesses in your security protocols." Conrad's security chief signaled that they had triangulated Reese's location to within 2 city blocks. "You've miscalculated, Reese," Conrad said, his voice dangerously soft. "I don't negotiate with threats to my family. What I do is eliminate them, permanently and thoroughly." "Bold words," Reese replied, sounding amused rather than concerned. "We'll see whose strategy prevails. Give my regards to Stella." The line went dead just as Conrad's team pinpointed Reese's exact location. "Deploy the interception team," Conrad ordered. "I want Reese contained within the hour." As the security personnel mobilized, Conrad turned to the surveillance feed showing Stella in the safe house's secured guest room. She sat on the edge of the bed, her posture reflecting defeat and confusion. Conrad had dismissed her as a direct threat, but she remained a liability, a potential point of leverage Reese could exploit. The strategic move would be to isolate her completely until the situation was resolved. Yet for the first time since executing his revenge against Stella and Bradford, Conrad felt a flicker of something approaching doubt. Not about the justice of his actions. Their betrayal had earned the consequences he delivered, but about the collateral damage his strategy had created. In targeting Bradford Dixon so completely, Conrad had inadvertently created a desperate man with nothing left to lose. That desperation had led to the hiring of Nolan Reese, who now posed a legitimate threat to Leo's safety. The strategist in Conrad recognized the irony. His perfect revenge had created an unforeseen vulnerability, exactly the scenario he had built his business success on avoiding. As he monitored the interception team's progress toward Reese's location, Conrad made a cold calculation. This threat would not be managed through conventional security measures alone. It would require the same methodical, ruthless approach he had applied to dismantling Stella and Bradford's lives. Nolan Reese had made a critical error in challenging Conrad Whitlock directly. He was about to discover just how thoroughly the silent strategist could respond when his son's safety was at stake. Chapter 9. The Final Calculation. The Cornwall safe house resembled a picturesque country estate from the outside, its stone walls and manicured gardens concealing state-of-the-art security systems and reinforced construction. Conrad arrived by helicopter shortly after dawn, having spent the night coordinating the manhunt for Nolan Reese. The interception team had missed Reese by minutes, finding only the burner phone he'd used to call Conrad left deliberately on a park bench. The psychological warfare aspect was clear. Reese was demonstrating his ability to anticipate Conrad's moves. Conrad entered the main house to find Leo in the sunroom, sketching the dramatic coastline visible through the windows. Despite the hasty relocation, his son appeared calm, a testament to the resilience he'd developed over the past year. "Morning, Dad," Leo greeted him, looking up from his sketch pad. "Your security team runs a tight ship. Blake wouldn't even let me walk in the garden without an escort." Conrad managed a reassuring smile. "Just precautionary. How are you holding up?" Leo shrugged. "It's not every day you get whisked away to a secret mansion because of a security concern. Are you going to tell me what's really happening?" Conrad had prepared for this question during the helicopter flight. Leo deserved some version of the truth, even if not every detail. "Someone from our past in Lakeside Heights has been making threats," Conrad explained, taking a seat across from Leo. "We have reason to believe they might attempt to approach you." Leo studied his father's face intently. "Mom, no, though she's involved indirectly," Conrad admitted. "She's actually here in a separate wing of the house." Leo's eyebrows shot up. "Mom's here? Since when?" "Since yesterday. She came to London hoping to see you, which inadvertently led someone else to your school." Leo was silent for a moment, processing this information. "The person making threats, it's connected to what you did to Mom and Mr. Dixon, isn't it?" Conrad had consistently underestimated his son's perceptiveness. "Yes. It appears Mr. Dixon hired someone to gather information that could be used against me legally. That person has now gone beyond his original assignment." "Can I see Mom?" Leo asked unexpectedly. Conrad hesitated. "Is that something you want?" "I'm not sure," Leo admitted. "But I think I need to. It's been over a year, Dad." After a moment's consideration, Conrad nodded. "I'll arrange it, but I need to speak with her first." In a secured meeting room, Conrad faced Stella across a polished oak table. She looked exhausted, but had regained some of her composure since their confrontation in London. "Leo wants to see you," Conrad stated without preamble. "Before I allow that, I need absolute clarity about your involvement with Reese." "I've told you everything," Stella insisted. "Bradford recommended him. I paid him to find you and Leo. That's all." "Did you discuss revenge with Bradford? Exposing my financial dealings?" "Anything that might have motivated Reese to go beyond simply locating us." Stella hesitated, confirming Conrad's suspicion that she wasn't being entirely forthcoming. "Bradford mentioned something about proving you had manipulated financial markets to destroy his business," she finally admitted. "He thought if we could get evidence, we might be able to negotiate a better settlement. But I never authorized anything that would put Leo at risk." Conrad studied her, weighing the likelihood that she was telling the truth. "Bradford's desire for revenge has created a dangerous situation. Reese is not merely a private investigator. He's former intelligence with specialized training. The kind of man who views this as a game rather than a job." Fear flickered across Stella's face. "What does he want?" "Money, supposedly. But I suspect his motivation has evolved into something more personal. A desire to match wits with someone he perceives as a worthy opponent." "What are you going to do?" Conrad's expression hardened. "What I've always done when faced with a threat to my family. Identify the vulnerabilities and exploit them decisively." Before Stella could respond, Conrad's secure phone rang with his security chief's code. "Excuse me," he said, stepping away from the table. "Go ahead." "Sir, we've intercepted communications between Reese and Dixon. Dixon appears to be en route to London, arriving Heathrow tomorrow morning on BA Flight 289 from Phoenix." "Interesting timing," Conrad observed. "Have a team ready to intercept Dixon at the airport and continue monitoring Reese's known associates. He'll need local support for whatever he's planning." After ending the call, Conrad returned to Stella. "It seems Bradford is more deeply involved than you suggested. He's flying to London as we speak." Stella's surprise appeared genuine. "I had no idea. He told me he couldn't afford to travel internationally anymore." "Apparently he found resources for this particular trip," Conrad replied dryly, "which raises questions about his true financial situation and what he hopes to accomplish by coming here personally. A theory was forming in Conrad's mind, one that explained both Reese's psychological warfare approach and Bradford's sudden appearance. This wasn't merely about revenge or money. It was about reversing the power dynamic Conrad had established through his systematic dismantling of their lives. "I'll arrange for you to see Leo this afternoon," Conrad told Stella, making a rapid strategic decision. "In the meantime, I'd like you to call Bradford." Stella looked confused. "Call him? Why?" "To find out exactly what he's planning," Conrad replied. "He still believes you're working with him. Use that." Later that day, after Stella's supervised call to Bradford had confirmed Conrad's suspicions, Leo sat in the same meeting room, nervously awaiting his mother. Conrad had prepared him with a sanitized version of events, emphasizing that while Stella had made poor choices, she had never intended to put him in danger. When Stella entered, her composure momentarily faltered at the sight of her son. Leo had grown taller, his features more defined, carrying himself with a confidence that had been absent in Lakeside Heights. "Leo," she said softly, "you look wonderful." Leo remained seated, his expression guarded. "Hi, Mom." Conrad observed their reunion from the security monitoring room, watching the awkward conversation unfold. Stella attempted to bridge the gap of the past year with questions about Leo's studies and life in London. Leo answered politely, but maintained an emotional distance that clearly pained her. "Your father tells me you've been accepted into a special program at the Architectural Association," Stella said. "Try to connect." "That's amazing, Leo. You always said architecture wasn't a real career path," Leo replied evenly. "That I was wasting my time with those silly building designs." Stella winced at having her words quoted back to her. "I was wrong about a lot of things, Leo, including that." As the conversation continued, Conrad's security chief entered the monitoring room with an update. "Sir, the team intercepted Dixon at Heathrow as planned. He's being transferred to our secondary location for questioning." Initial search of his belongings found this. He handed Conrad a thumb drive in an evidence bag. Preliminary analysis suggests it contains sophisticated malware designed to penetrate financial systems, similar to tools used in state-sponsored hacking operations. Conrad's suspicions crystallized into certainty. Reese isn't just hunting for evidence of my financial manipulations. He's planning to plant it. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. If Reese couldn't find legitimate proof of Conrad's supposed financial crimes, he would manufacture it, using Bradford as the delivery mechanism. The goal wasn't merely revenge, but complete reversal, to frame Conrad for the very type of market manipulation and fraud that he had exposed in Bradford's business operations. "Increase security protocols on all Phantom investment systems immediately," Conrad ordered, "and prepare the conference room. I want to speak with Dixon personally." An hour later, Conrad faced Bradford Dixon across a table in the secure conference room. The once flashy car dealer looked diminished, his designer suit replaced by casual travel clothes, his confident demeanor eroded by a year of financial and social destruction. "Hello, Bradford," Conrad greeted him coolly. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Bradford attempted a defiant sneer that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about, Whitlock." Conrad placed the thumb drive on the table between them. "This sophisticated piece of malware that Nolan Reese gave you to plant in my financial systems." Did he explain that it would create false evidence of market manipulation that could be tracked back to my accounts? Or did he simply tell you it would get the evidence you needed? Uncertainty flickered across Bradford's face. "You've been targeting me for over a year. Destroyed my businesses, ruined my reputation. All because I fell in love with your wife." Conrad's laugh was devoid of humor. "Love? Is that what you call it? You pursued a married woman because you thought she was the wife of a financially struggling advisor, an easy conquest who would be impressed by your flashy lifestyle and apparent success. That's not. When you discovered my true financial status, your interest evolved from mere infidelity to strategic opportunity." Conrad continued relentlessly. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise." Bradford's facade cracked further. "You systematically destroyed everything I built." "No, Bradford. I simply exposed what you had already corrupted through your own actions. The financial fraud at your dealerships predated my involvement by years. The tax evasion was your choice. I merely ensured the appropriate authorities became aware of it. Conrad leaned forward slightly. But that's not why you're here. You're here because Nolan Reese convinced you that you could reverse our positions, frame me for financial crimes using this malware, then expose me the way I exposed you. Bradford's silence confirmed Conrad's assessment. What you fail to consider is that Reese has his own agenda, Conrad continued. Once he realized the extent of my resources, this became a game to him, a chance to test his skills against someone he considers a worthy opponent. You're merely a pawn in his actual strategy. He promised me revenge, Bradford said weakly. A chance to rebuild. At what cost? Conrad asked pointedly. Did he mention that his approach has endangered Leo? That he's been conducting surveillance on a 14-year-old boy? Bradford's expression shifted, genuine concern breaking through his resentment. Despite his many flaws, Conrad had observed that Bradford had always treated Leo with kindness during his relationship with Stella. I never agreed to anything involving Leo, Bradford insisted. The plan was just to get evidence of your financial manipulations. Yet here we are, Conrad replied coldly. With my son under protection because your operative decided to escalate the situation into personal territory. Conrad pushed a document across the table. This is a complete confession detailing your involvement with Reese, including the planned cyber attack on my financial systems. Sign it, and I'll ensure you return to Phoenix with enough resources to start over, far from my family. Refuse, and I'll have no choice but to pursue this as an attempted cybercrime with all the legal consequences that entails. Bradford stared at the document, then at Conrad. And Reese. Reese is my concern, not yours. After Bradford signed the confession, Conrad had him escorted to a secure location where he would remain until the situation with Reese was resolved. With one liability contained, Conrad turned his full attention to the more dangerous threat. The psychological profile his team had compiled on Nolan Reese suggested a man motivated by intellectual challenge rather than mere financial gain. This presented both a vulnerability and an opportunity. Reese's ego could be leveraged against him. Conrad instructed his security team to leak information suggesting that Leo was being moved to a different safe house, a classic misdirection play that would appeal to Reese's intelligence background. Meanwhile, Conrad implemented the final phase of his counter-strategy. That evening, as Conrad reviewed the security arrangements with his team, Leo entered his temporary office in the Cornwall estate. I spoke with Mom, Leo said, taking a seat across from his father. She told me some things about what happened in Lakeside Heights, about how you systematically dismantled her life and Mr. Dixon's after we left. Conrad studied his son carefully. Yes, I did. She says you destroyed her reputation, isolated her socially, and bankrupted Mr. Dixon's businesses as revenge for how they treated you. That's a simplified version, but essentially accurate, Conrad confirmed, not attempting to sugarcoat his actions. Leo was quiet for a moment. The same strategic thinking you use in business, you used against them. Yes, and now someone's using similar tactics against you, Leo observed. Doesn't that make you question whether your approach was right? Conrad considered his response carefully. The difference is intent, Leo. I never endangered innocent people in my actions against your mother and Bradford. This man, Reese, has chosen to target you, someone completely uninvolved in the original conflict. Leo nodded slowly. I understand the difference. I'm trying to reconcile the father I've come to know this past year with someone capable of such calculated destruction. I won't apologize for protecting you from people who are causing you harm, Conrad said firmly. Your mother's constant criticism and dismissal of your talents was damaging you in ways that became clear only after we left. Bradford's relationship with her directly contributed to that toxic environment. So what happens now? Leo asked. With this Reese person? He'll be dealt with, Conrad replied simply. And then we'll return to our lives in London. And Mom. Conrad sighed. That's partly up to you, Leo. If you want a relationship with her, I won't prevent it. But it would need to be structured carefully to ensure she doesn't return to her previous patterns of behavior. Later that night, Conrad received the call he'd been anticipating from his security team leader. Target took the bait, sir. Reese attempted to access the decoy safe house location. He's been apprehended and is being transported to the secure facility now. Excellent. I'll speak with him in the morning. At dawn, Conrad entered the interrogation room where Nolan Reese was being held. The former intelligence operative presented a stark contrast to Bradford Dixon, calm, composed, and showing no signs of stress despite his captivity. Mr. Whitlock, Reese greeted him with unexpected cordiality. I wondered when you'd make an appearance. Mr. Reese, Conrad replied, taking a seat across from him. I believe we have matters to discuss. Reese smiled thinly. Indeed, though I must compliment your team on the elegant misdirection play. The leaked transport plans were convincing enough to warrant investigation, yet contained subtle inconsistencies that should have alerted me. A test within a test. Impressive. You mistake me for someone interested in playing games, Conrad said coldly. You targeted my son. That was your fatal error. Business, Mr. Whitlock. Bradford Dixon paid for results. And yet you escalated beyond his parameters, developing what your communications described as a personal interest in the case. Conrad produced a folder containing printed emails between Reese and his associates. That's when this ceased to be business and became something else entirely. Reese's expression remained neutral, but Conrad detected a flicker of surprise at the revelation that his communications had been compromised. Your methods with Dixon and your ex-wife were artwork, Reese admitted. I recognized a kindred strategic mind. Few people appreciate the elegance of systematic deconstruction. Here's what happens next, Conrad said, ignoring the attempt at establishing common ground. The evidence of your planned cyber attack has been secured. Bradford Dixon has provided a signed confession detailing your involvement. I have 3 options regarding your fate. Reese raised an eyebrow, still maintaining his composure. I'm listening. Option 1. I turn you over to British authorities with evidence of your planned cyber crimes, your surveillance of a minor, and your history of unauthorized operations that led to your dishonorable discharge. Given your background, you'd face significant prison time. Messy and public, Reese observed. Not your typical approach. Option 2. I use my resources to ensure you never work in private security again. Your reputation would be systematically destroyed among potential clients. Your financial accounts would be frozen through various legal mechanisms. You would effectively cease to exist professionally, following your established playbook. More elegant, I grant you. Option 3, Conrad continued. You sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, accept a one-time payment of £1 million, and disappear permanently from my family's life. Any future contact, direct or indirect, would trigger immediate implementation of Option 2. Reese studied Conrad thoughtfully. A generous offer, considering the circumstances. Though I'm curious why you'd choose such a clean resolution rather than the more thorough destruction you applied to Dixon. Because unlike Bradford, you're merely a professional who overstepped, Conrad replied. Your error was in personalizing what should have remained a business transaction. I'm offering you the opportunity to correct that error. After a calculated pause, Reese nodded. Option 3 has obvious appeal, though I must admit some disappointment at not seeing how our chess match might have concluded under different circumstances. It concluded the moment you targeted my son, Conrad stated flatly. Everything since has been mere execution of an inevitable outcome. Later that day, with Reese's situation resolved through the signed NDA and financial transfer, Conrad made his final strategic decision regarding Stella. After consulting with Leo, who had expressed cautious interest in maintaining limited contact with his mother, Conrad offered Stella a revised arrangement. You'll return to Lakeside Heights, he informed her in his temporary office at the Cornwall estate. The monthly stipend will continue as established in our divorce agreement. Additionally, I've arranged for you to be offered a position with the Henderson Foundation, a legitimate role managing their charitable events, not a handout. Stella looked surprised at this unexpected development. Why would you do that after everything that's happened? Because despite your mistakes, you're still Leo's mother, Conrad replied evenly. He's expressed interest in maintaining some relationship with you, which would be facilitated by your having stable employment and social standing. And the conditions? Stella asked perceptively. Complete confidentiality regarding my financial history and the events of the past year. Monthly sessions with a family therapist before any in-person visits with Leo. An absolute acceptance that any attempt to undermine Leo's confidence or choices will result in immediate termination of all contact. Stella was silent for a moment before responding. You've thought of everything, as usual. I protect what matters to me, Conrad stated simply. Leo matters. His well-being is non-negotiable. And us? Will there ever be anything beyond these calculated arrangements? Conrad's expression remained impassive. There is no us, Stella. There hasn't been for years. What remains is a pragmatic arrangement focused solely on Leo's well-being. 3 days later, with the situation fully resolved, Conrad and Leo returned to their London townhouse. Bradford Dixon had been escorted back to Phoenix with enough capital to start a modest business unrelated to automotive sales, bound by legal agreements that would ensure his permanent distance from Conrad's family. Nolan Reese had disappeared as agreed, his threat neutralized through the combination of financial incentive and potential consequences. Stella had returned to Lakeside Heights to begin her new position with the Henderson Foundation, with arrangements made for monitored video calls with Leo as a first step toward rebuilding their relationship under careful supervision. As Conrad and Leo settled back into their London routine, Leo approached his father in the study one evening. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Conrad looked up from his work. "Of course. Do you ever regret how thoroughly you dismantled Mom and Mr. Dixon's lives? Not the fact that you did it, but the extent of it." Conrad considered the question thoughtfully. Regret implies I would make different choices if given another opportunity. I wouldn't. The strategy one implemented was precisely calibrated to the situation, even though it ultimately created this danger with Reese. Every strategy has potential second-order consequences, Conrad explained. The art is in anticipating them and having contingencies ready. The Reese situation was managed because we were prepared for such possibilities. Leo nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about something Mom said, that you never forgive anyone who betrays you." "That's largely accurate," Conrad admitted. "I believe consequences should match actions. Your mother and Bradford betrayed my trust in profound ways over an extended period. The consequences reflected that reality." "What about me?" Leo asked quietly. "What if I make mistakes or disappoint you someday?" Conrad's expression softened immediately. "Leo, there's a fundamental difference between mistakes and betrayal. Everyone makes mistakes. They're how we learn and grow. Betrayal is a deliberate choice to harm someone who trusts you. I can't imagine a scenario where you would make such a choice." Leo seemed reassured by this distinction. "So the strategic mastermind has a heart after all," he said with a small smile. "Only for you," Conrad replied simply. "Always for you." As Leo returned to his architectural studies, Conrad reflected on the events of the past year. The mask of mediocrity he had worn for so long in Lakeside Heights had been permanently discarded. The strategic mind that had built his financial empire had been fully revealed, both in business and in his methodical dismantling of those who had betrayed him. The silent strategist had emerged from the shadows, his true nature now known to those who mattered. For Conrad Whitlock, this was the only victory that had ever truly mattered. The freedom to be himself completely, and to ensure his son could flourish in an environment where his talents were recognized and nurtured. The rest, the revenge, the countermeasures, the strategic maneuvering, had been merely the necessary means to that essential end. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.